Welcome back. We are in our final segment or lesson for the unit industrialization, and this time we're going to talk about industrialization in Japan. This is guided notes 10.3. So let's get started. Here we're talking about our only two vocabulary words, imperialism and protectorate. So make sure you get those vocabulary words down. Alright, so let's talk about industrialization in Japan. So before the arrival of Matthew Perry from the US, in 1854, Japan had been relatively isolated for about 200 years, meaning that they did not associate with much of the Western world, okay? In the 1500s, Europeans tried to trade with Japan, but many of the shoguns, remember we talked about feudal Japan, had control of Japan, and they really banned outside contact with the outside world, with the Western world, and they did not want Japan or Japanese society to interact with any part of the Western world. They are a very ethnocentric society, and that means that Japanese were not allowed to travel outside of the nation, nor was foreigners allowed to come inside the nation. However, Japan realized by the 19th century, because the Western world was moving very fast and rapidly because of industrialization, that they needed to seek out ways to become industrialized too. But also the United States and Europe were looking for new markets to sell their manufactured goods. So in a way, it was kind of beneficial for both societies. Alright, so here comes Matthew Perry. So in 1854, Matthew Perry issues this letter, quote unquote, asking Japan to have an open trade with the United States. Now, I have it in quotations, or asking in quotations, because this wasn't really an ask, it was rather more of an open threat. Because he really basically said, hey, the United States is going to trade with you, and we're going to have an open trade, meaning that any other nation can come in and trade as well, or else we're just going to force and do it anyway. Okay. So Americans and Europeans wanted to trade and use Japan just so that they can resupply their ships as they are moving across the Asian countries such as India and so forth. So it was a great place for them to stop and refuel, what have you. Japanese shoguns, they were very impressed by the American show of force, because Perry said, hey, we're going to trade with you or else, right? So Japan agreed to open its ports, and now they signed this Treaty of Kanagawa. And now this gave trading rights to the United States, and then later Britain, France, and Russia also received trading rights. Now, because Japan became industrialized, this treaty had a big impact on Japan. Now, Japan is going to shift dramatically from being, how can I say, the colonial feudal style of Japan to now coming imperial, right? Or industrialized Japan. So moving from imperial Japan to industrialized Japan. So that weakened the power of the shogun, because now the foreigners that's coming in from the West are getting more of that power, because they have all of the technology, all of the knowledge in industry or industrialization, right? And it showed Japan had to modernize, and they had to industrialize in order to compete with these Western nations. So again, these shoguns, they had to step back and allow foreign Westerners to come in to help modernize and industrialize Japan. The samurai then led a rebellion to remove the Tokugawa shogun from power, and then by 1868, the emperor was established as the main leader of Japan, and this began what was called the Meiji Restoration. And Meiji in this case means the enlightened one. Enlightened one in this case, enlightened in the ways of the Western world in terms of industrialization and modernization. Okay. So again, many of the Western society came in, and the emperor also sent out advisors and government officials to Western nations such as England and Germany and so forth to study their government systems, their economic systems, especially their technology and their Western customs, right? So that they can become modernized and industrialized. And also foreign experts were invited into Japan as well. So if you have never seen The Last Samurai, I suggest that you watch it. Is it historically accurate? No, it is not. However, the premise is very, very accurate in terms of this guy that you're gonna see here. He's invited into Imperial Japan in order to modernize Japan, and now he learns the ways of the samurai, and you'll have to see the rest of the movie to find that out. But I am going to leave a link in this video so that you can see a snippet of The Last Samurai as they prepare for their last battle. Also, if you want to get a great idea of Imperial Japan and how it operated and how the Industrial Revolution affected Japan, Yip Man is also a very good. The entire series, Yip Man 1, 2, and 3, is a great series to watch as well. Alright, so let's continue. Alright, so what happened to the Japanese government after industrialization? Hopefully you get a sort of an idea of what happened after Japan industrialized, or what happened after that last clip with The Last Samurai. I hope that piqued your interest. But the government started to institute the following. We're talking about the Meiji Government, right? They abolished the feudal order. So there's no more feudalism in Japan. They changed all of the feudal domains to administrative districts. The daimyo is now removed from power. There's no more daimyo anymore. The samurai is abolished. There is no more samurai. So remember that the samurai was much like the knights that would protect and serve the government and the shoguns and the emperor. That was no longer there. So they abolished the samurai. And now they established a constitutional government, and they actually established a new military, which we're going to get into in a minute. So the Constitution of 1889 is based on a German model, and that established a constitutional monarchy with a legislature. The emperor commanded the armed forces. He named a prime minister and appointed cabinets. They recognized individual rights. They could limit rights on the interest of the country, but also voting was limited. Only 5% of the population was able to vote in the 1890 election. So even though they had a constitutional government, they still restricted the voting rights of the people. All right, so let's talk about the industrialized economy. The Meiji government used a lot of Western methods and machinery to industrialize Japan. They started to build factories and sold them to wealthy Japanese businessmen known as zaibatsu. And the government also developed a full banking system. They built ports and they built railroads. So by 1890, the Japanese government was so strong and the population had grown so much that peasants started to move to the cities to look for jobs. Now, also they industrialized their military. So remember, the samurai was no longer the warriors in Japan. The Japanese admired the discipline of the German army and the skill of the British Navy, so they patterned a lot of their military on behalf of the German and British armies, right? It was required that all men join the military. So all men had to join the military. And because of that, Japan develops this strong army and navy, and they begin to defeat many European powers in warfare. So during the Meiji Restoration, Japan transformed itself to a major world power in a short amount of time. And Japan became so militaristically strong, that it became imperialistic, What does imperialism mean? Imperialism means when a dominant country takes control of another country by force. And what they did is that they started to imperialize or become imperialistic, and they took control of certain areas around them, such as Korea. Okay, and they made Korea protectorate. Japan started to become imperialistic because they needed raw materials and they needed new markets for their factories, right? So they needed to find people or countries that would buy from them and buy these new materials from them. Now, Japan, because it is an island, they had to depend on trade, and they needed these new markets. They needed to find places that they could conquer and place under their control so that they can have a continual market that people can buy from them, right? In terms of these goods and these manufactured goods that they're producing. So because it's an island, they lack many of the natural resources to keep the industrialization going for them. So in order for them to compete and become this major world power and continue to be a major world power, Japan is going to have to continue to be imperialistic. And that's something that we're going to talk about in the next unit. So this is your apply it section. You're going to use this photo of a Meiji emperor, the Meiji emperor that first came in. Actually, it's not a photo. This is actually a painting, I believe, but it's in black and white. So you're going to use this painting to discuss the change from Imperial Japan to Industrial Japan. How does this show that? Right, so use your guided notes and answer the guided note, the questions, sorry, in your guided notes and in the video. And I thank you for listening to this new unit on industrialization and watching it, and I'll see you in the next unit. Peace.